welcome to our first event with Biner Startup Partner. This event is called Start Up Your Startup Journey. And the purpose of today is to really focus on the key factors and things that we should focus on as a startup, and what will give you sort of the most success in your journey ahead. Today we've invited stakeholders in this area to talk about their work and their experiences working with startups. So we're going to talk about the keys to consider when you are starting your journey. We're going to talk about the Death Valley phase, and that's a phase that all startups go through. So we're going to look at what keys can we consider to get through this phase in a good way. And then we're going to end with the panelists coming up and talking about the COVID situation and how this has sort of impacted the investment market, and how as entrepreneurs we can prepare ourselves to face this sort of new reality. We want your questions and your comments. So if you have any questions that you want us to ask the panelists, just put them in the chat box and I'll make sure to address them as they come up. So I think that's it, and we'll go ahead and get started. Before we do, I'll just present a little bit about Biner. Biner is a consulting company where we have about 30 plus consultants working with different clients around the area in the space between business and IT. We also have an academy where we provide training, certified training in the same space that we operate in, so in business analysis and agile practices, etc. And now we have Biner Startup, and our focus here is really to help startups in the very early phases to test out their concepts and to get them ready for a time when they might need first round investment to make that a successful process for them. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll invite the first panelists up. Come on up. Klementina Österberg, she's the CEO of GU Ventures, and Helene, Öhrvall, an advisor with Almi Företagspartner. So why don't you get started?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, very nice to see you. And my name is Klementina Österberg, like Marie said. I'm really happy to be here. And Helene and I have worked together for a long time, right?
Yeah, and my name is Helene Öhrvall, and I work as a business advisor at the Almi Företagspartner. Especially in early stage ideas and startups.
And you've been there for many years.
A decade.
A decade.
Or more than forever.
Let's not talk time.
No, okay. No, then I feel much older than I am.
Great. Okay, so let us just introduce our companies first. I mean, maybe you can start with Almi. What does Almi do?
Almi Företagspartner is a public company, you could say, and we invest in business who wants to grow, both with business advice and financial advice and loans. That's practically what we do. So companies who want to grow, if you're a startup or an established company, it doesn't matter, but we would like you to grow and help you during the way.
And we're really, I mean, I'm as one of the people that usually contact you to get loans. It's a really important business.
Yes.
And you help a lot of companies. I don't know, can you tell us how many have you worked with?
A lot. I think we meet, it's around 600 companies a year that gets loans from us, and a lot more that gets advice. So sometimes between 600 and 1,000 companies a year in Västra Götaland only. And Almi exists in the whole of Sweden in different companies.
Yeah. And in that perspective, GU Ventures is a much smaller company, and we are, I think, 20 persons helping out right now 70 startups. And our main focus is actually to invest in innovations based here in Gothenburg from Gothenburg University. So you have to have some affiliation, and we do invest. So that's why we also need some loans together with our investments. We have an incubator that is top ranked, and we work with a lot of entrepreneurship schools and other partners together with us to help our startups to do that. But I mean, we have invested in a total in 25 years in 200 companies, and you do that like for breakfast.
Yes, we meet a lot of more companies than investors, but we meet almost every startup in our region. So I know most of them.
Yeah,
At least I've heard all about them.
So you know what you need to be to become an entrepreneur, right? So let's start out
I
with
hope
that.
that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not an entrepreneur myself, and I don't dare to. I don't know what pig is entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The coward entrepreneur. I know what to do, but I don't want to do it by myself.
And actually, you can still be an entrepreneur, right? Because, I mean, we talked about it when we sort of planned this meeting, that maybe the first thing we want you to start to think about is, who are you?
Yeah.
What are your values? What are your ethics? What do you want to do with your business idea? You probably have some goal. Why do you want to do that?
Yes. What's your vision?
Yeah.
What are you going to establish and why?
Yeah.
Do you just want to develop the idea, or do you really want to do a business of it?
Exactly.
That's the key factor. You need to know if we should help you to have a business idea about it, not just develop. You have to think developing is fun, but the business needs to be more fun.
And of course, it's okay also that, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and you kind of think that, okay, I'm weak in this area, then it's good that you acknowledge that, because in that case, I think, and we talked about it, you and me, Helene, that in that case, you need to have people helping you as well.
Yeah.
So if you know your weaknesses and know your strengths, you know who you want to work together with, who's combining your strengths together with your weaknesses.
Yeah. Because no one is good at everything.
I know some perfect persons though. Yeah. I do, but they're very
Except
few.
yourself.
No. I mean the entrepreneurs. Yeah, you and me, we're perfect.
Yes, of course.
Of course. No, but I'm saying that nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
And we really need to look at what is in my business that I can do really well, and who do I need to work with to do. Somebody else maybe helps me to do the administration or the sales or whatever, the investment proposal. So get help. So that was our first mission to tell you that.
Yeah. Know your weaknesses.
Yeah. Know your weaknesses and your strengths, and think about who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah.
Then you come to what you want to do, the idea.
Yeah.
And I mean, we heard lots of ideas during the years, and
good ones and great ones.
Yes, great ones, good ones, really bad ones. But always, I mean, you get surprised that even the bad ones can turn out really well.
Yeah.
And you get even more surprised that the really good ones maybe fall because of some really horrific, simple thing that matters, and it wasn't there. Yeah. Unfortunately.
So if you're a great team, you're more likely to success. If you're not that great team, it's harder to success.
Because then when you're a great team, then you can make changes.
Yeah.
You can contact Helene and your colleagues, the advisors, and you can talk to them about your problems, and they can probably help you out. They can help you to get connected to other people. And if you want to do that, you can probably change. You can, as you call it, pivot your idea.
As an entrepreneur in the early stage, you always have to pivot your idea, because it won't be the right perfect fit at once. You have to pivot a lot of times.
Maybe they will have the right perfect fit. But anyway, think about what Helene said. Even though you think you have the right perfect fit, you need to verify it. So one of the things you told me that you wanted to talk more about is the customer survey and stuff.
Yeah, because I've been quite long in this field, and in the beginning, you develop the idea, the product, the idea, and then you contact the customers and please buy this. It never works. And for the last 10 years, startups have been more keen on asking the client, the customers, what are they really need? What are the needs? So you have to discover that first. Is it a real problem that you are solving?
Exactly.
So that's the key factor. What is it you're going to do? Is it just something you want, but is this something the customer wants? Is it the right type of solutions?
And you and I, we meet a lot of people that they verify their ideas, and it's actually quite simple today. You have so much potential to digitally contact a lot of people, and you can still do it as for free almost, like SurveyMonkey or whatever. Send it out to Facebook, put it up on Instagram. Who do need or work in this field that, and 10 people or 100 people will email you. Yes, I work in this field. I can do this. So reach out for help to get your customer survey right.
And ask your customers, how do they solve the problem today? How would you like the problem to be solved? So you get as much input as you can from your customers.
That's really important. And also what I think is important, we talked about you and I as well many times, is that when you do get those contacts and you want to do that survey, you probably will do your first sales pitch.
Yeah.
So don't forget that this is the first contact and you still want to do good, have a good signal to this company.
Yeah.
And this is a great practice. And don't worry that you will fail or if something happens, you'll just get back on it and ask for another meeting. And I think that people will help you if you're in that open-minded, solution-minded, let's see what you need, I can maybe fix this.
Yeah, and a lot of startups or entrepreneurs, innovators are very scared to talk to the customer because I don't want to expose my idea, they can steal it.
Yeah. That's the elephant in the room.
That's the elephant in the room, but you can talk a lot about your product without exposing the most secret thing. Just to talk it in another words, just to get the needs.
Exactly. Get the problem right, get the needs right, and how maybe that will.
Yeah, and talk to the customers through all the development phase. Because in the beginning you ask the needs, and further on, is this how they want? Does it work like you're expected? How much would you like to pay for this? Everything. So the further on, the more deep questions to the customers.
And of course, we're going to talk about patents as well.
Yeah.
If you work in that sort of a company and you want to start something where you can patent something, maybe you ask the questions in a bit different way. And maybe you already know then, of course, that this is actually patentable because some patent lawyers have already done a search. But it's still really important to look at the needs anyway. So the next bit we maybe should address is the business model, because the one thing is how the solution looks like, but then the other thing is actually how you want to sell it. How are you going to put up the partnerships around you? Who's going to make the stuff, or who's going to deliver the service, or how will you follow it up? How can you make it better? Or this chain of people.
And how does the market works? Can you sell directly to the customer yourself, or do you have to
go by distribution?
Or, and that kind of thing. And the first business model, you will have to change it, probably.
Many times.
Don't
worry about that.
But you have to have an idea. And about how do you think? Do you think you can earn as much as you need? So it's worth do all this development. Will you get your money back?
And also remember that you don't change the business model maybe because you failed in some way. You change it because you also develop. So maybe in the beginning you need to think about how can you be pragmatical about doing some stuff, and then you do that. But then in the next step you will have to have maybe other contacts or other partners to work with. And I guess that both you guys do a lot of advising within that, and also Biner is really professional in doing research about what do these businesses need? How can you sort of sharpen your business model straight ahead?
And you can have more than one business model, depending on what kind of client you have.
That's right. So good to think it over, and don't worry to change it. That is our goal. When you do the business model, you of course also then probably will develop the roadmap. So if you're going out this way, what type of development process and sales process do you see? What would you do in different stages? It's also good to think about it at the same time, because maybe then you realize that, if I want to do this in my roadmap, then this business model won't work. So they sort of are connected.
Yes, they are, definitely.
Should we take the next one? The technology.
You can do quite a lot with not the deep technology, just to do the minimal viable product, or just a mock-up in the beginning to see does it really works. Because the development of the techniques, if it's not if it's technical idea, that's won't be the hard part. Because probably that's your expert fields. The sales part will always be the hard one. Or I don't know, it depends on who they are, maybe. It depends on if they're really into the technology and maybe not interested in sales that much, or the other way around. They actually are very good at listening into what the customer wants, and then can maybe alter the product to something else as well. So it's once more, it's good to know who you are and what you like, and of course you do. That's
the smallest question here. And to work with that minimal viable product, you can also think that, okay, this product is actually, or prototype, or whatever you like to call it, you can actually make money on that too. So don't forget that you can contact potential clients and ask if they want to do a pilot together with you, if they want to test the product, if they want to buy a license to test the product, write some sort of a deal. Because if you have that, they know that it's a value in that. So try to make some sort of value added model in your first product.
And test it with the clients, the customers.
Exactly. So what we say is don't sit around for 3-4 years and just develop the technology.
And then think you can sell it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that won't happen.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about sustainability. If you guys out there have a great idea, don't forget that nowadays we have a huge transformation and change in our society, and nobody will buy something that's not sustainable. So you have to think through your whole life cycle management. If you work with plastics, or if you work with, I don't know, pharma, or if you work with services, people are going to ask you, okay, but how will you recycle that? Or what will you do in this case? Will this end up in the ocean? And will this toxic, I don't know, whatever waste we're going to have? So don't forget to think about that also as a part of your product.
And also think about the team, diversify it. So it's not just guys in the mid-30s.
Or the mid-60s, or girls in the mid-40s.
No, so mix the team, because both male and female, different backgrounds, nationalities, that would strengthen the business
because
as well.
You want to reach maybe many customers, so don't forget that customers are not exactly the same.
So
that's a good.
The team should be a kind of a mirror of the customer.
So now that you know who you are, you know your business model and your technology, then maybe it's time that you feel that, okay, now I can start my company. Maybe you have already done it, of course, but we would just wanted to say that also, don't forget that it's good to have aktiebolag, I'm saying in Swedish. It's good to have a limited company, right?
That's the best one.
We see a lot of entrepreneurs that don't start out like that. No. Actually, they want to have other type of firms.
It's not like a secure for yourself. Maybe the person is responsible for everything, and it's much harder if you want searching for an investor.
Exactly. They probably won't invest.
No, they won't invest.
And actually, the government has lowered the money that you have to put into a new limited company. Right now, it's just 25,000 crowns. You can start it at verksam.se by yourself. It doesn't take that much time. You get the documents, and they help you out probably. You can, if you're in a hurry, you can also buy one. I think it's cost 7,900 crowns to buy a new firm, so you don't have to do anything more, just to sign the paper and put in, of course, the 25,000 as well. So it's good to think about if you want to start the company. This is just like a little fee to start up with, but you're probably going to have a budget the first year, and we'll talk more about the financials later on. So you just don't start the company and then realize, oh my God, this 25,000 of course will disappear like within a month or something, depending on what you.
But wait to start until you're really sure that this is something that you really want to do, and you know that you can.
So what do you think the timing is? Is it when they want to send their first invoice, sort of?
It could be. But when you have got enough information that you reason, and you think you can make money of it, then you can start. So check.
And I mean,
it's many. Get on as boxes as possible before you start.
And even if you already have started it, of course it doesn't matter. And you're going to learn going along on that road. I guess.
And try in the beginning to do as much as you can yourself. Bootstrap.
Exactly.
The more you can bootstrap in the beginning, the better.
Sorry, how is the timing? Just so that we know.
The timing is good. Good. Are you ready for a question?
And not yet.
No.
We want to talk a little bit more about sales, if it's okay. I mean, that is one of the most important stuff, and we don't want to miss out on that. And I guess that I just want to say to everyone that I think that everyone is good in sales. I think that people say, no, I'm not good. I haven't sold before. I don't know what that is. But don't worry about that. It's just about communicating communicating with people, saying, hi there, this is my product, this is my ambition, this is what I think I want to do. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. It's not that hard, even if it could be quite for someone. You need to step out of your comfort zone. But that's, if you don't do that, the business will never fly.
No. And also together with the feeling that you have on what your strengths are. Maybe if you don't want to do sales, then of course you just grab somebody that's good on sales and get them in the team. And maybe build a board where you have people that have lots of experience in sales, so they can open doors for you and get you in contact with different persons or advisors. I mean, you don't actually need to have maybe a board in the beginning, but it's good to get people all around in your business
and
to help you.
Start the sale early. So the sales starts
with the customer survey.
With the customer survey and follow them up. Those who seem more interested, follow them up and keep them posted on your development. And finally, they probably would like to be a pilot customer. Probably, hopefully, pay for it or at least pay indirect while they put their resources
on that. Exactly. And while you're doing that, you're going to learn more about the market. You're going to learn the metrics you need to have. Because when you're going to do this more and more, and when you're going to raise capital, you really need to know the market. And if you haven't even been there, you haven't even asked someone, it's going to be quite difficult to motivate other people to invest in your company. So that's why it's really good to meet a lot of people and know your metrics in your market.
And don't forget, know your competitors.
Exactly.
And a lot of innovators don't think, no one has this idea. I don't have any competitors. Yes,
they
you always
do.
have, because you do
10,000.
You do. The customers do it in one way today.
Exactly. You always have substitutes. You always have some sort of competitors in some area. And what people are going to ask you directly, why is this one better than this one?
Why should I change my way of work and work with your products?
Exactly. So what maybe we could say, and in some cases, you can actually go out and buy the competitor's product. Try it on. Test it, see what you think about it, and base that on your own experience as well. Maybe you should go out and just have a blind test as well. Put 3 products on the table and ask people to try them out, and then the users can tell you back, okay, which one did I like and why. So that's really interesting to see for yourself. Maybe I need to think that my minimum viable product needs to be developed this way. So it's a really good intelligence to have. And also what we didn't want to forget is that PR is really important when you do this, so that people can know that, I'm buying a product that has been developed by somebody who's maybe knows what he's doing or she's doing. And we want to make a little bit of commercial sort of. I think it's good that you know that there's a lot of competitions out there for new ideas. Enter a competition, get people to know you. Maybe you win a prize, maybe you don't, but you get a network. So I worked in my younger days at Venture Cup and met a lot of inventors and entrepreneurs pitching their ideas at a competition like Venture Cup. And there's many other competitions as well, or sort of scholarships that you can win. Helene, you and I, we work at Skapa Stiftelsens as well. I work also for Årets Nybyggare, which is new settlers that Almi supported many years. Come and enter the competition, get some free press.
And the most important thing is build your network. And that will lead you on.
Exactly.
If they don't know the answers, they know someone who can.
So let's talk investments later on and get the people some questions maybe.
Okay, we have one question. What is it? I'm gonna come into the screen a bit. Okay, this is interesting. As a biomedical engineer, I have a passion for healthcare startup, but I'm struggling to find the potential needs of the hospitals that need to be addressed. Do you have any words for that? That's your field.
I can say that if it has to do with hospitals, I would contact if you're here in the region, I guess, I would contact the Sahlgrenska University Hospital, where they have something called Innovationsplattformen, the innovation platform. There you have advisors that have met a lot of ideas within their fields, and they're probably the best ones to answer this. You also have a lot of others working within this field, for instance, Sahlgrenska Science Park, G Ventures, if it has contact or affiliation with Gothenburg University. But I think that what you need to do is ask Innovationsplattform and the innovation platform.
Yeah,
That's the first one.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time here today. These are really important keys. At Biner Startup, as I said, we focus on startups in this really early phase. So for us, it's important to highlight what do startups need to focus on. So I really appreciate your experience and the keys that you gave us today. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the next session, and this is with Karl Xavier he's the head of investments with Axilium Holding. He's going to talk about the Death Valley phase, which is a really interesting topic, so I'm super excited to hear. So come on up.
Thanks.
And take it away, and if questions come up, then I'll just note them down and we can take them. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. I work at Axilium Capital, or Axilium Holding, an affiliated company. I'm one of the partners there, and I started this company together with another partner a couple of years ago, and really getting deep down into this startup investing scene, which was quite new to me up until a few years ago. Startup investing is a completely different type of investing. We have traditional investments with shares and property and fixed interest investments. Startups is off the chart. So, okay, we're good? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so it's really off the chart, and that's something that really caught my attention, because traditional investments, they've become a little bit boring, and something that even the wider general public is realizing is that's also the case. But unfortunately, we found my partner and I that retail investors, the normal mums and dads out there, they don't actually get access to these investments in the really good startup companies. And they're either too small, they don't have the contacts, they don't have their expertise. And that's something that we wanted to democratize then at Axilium. So what we've done, we've started a business model where Axilium Holding does investments, and we then package investments together and offer a collection of retail members that we have the opportunity to invest in those companies and become an indirect investor. So we represent them, they get the opportunity to be part of the exciting journey, but the startup company doesn't get a massive cap table that they need to worry about. And so far that's working out quite well, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. So our background is from financing, and I mean, most of my background is from financial advising to high net worth clients, and some of them got those opportunities, but I saw that they weren't really going to the normal people out there. So we focus on early stage technology companies and life science companies as well. That's something that I guess that's where the real innovation is, where you can make a paradigm shift and get that massive change in the market that we're looking for. It's right at the sort of end of the risk scale. As my colleagues mentioned here, the people behind the investments that we look at, they are absolutely the most important. Without them, without the right person behind it, we see that an idea won't fly. It doesn't really matter how good that idea is. We also look for true innovation, something that's globally scalable and really changes the market that it's in. So as Klementina said here, you can compare sort of different competitors and see what's out there, see what the customer's doing now. We're not looking for something that's incrementally better. We're looking for something that fundamentally changes what the customer can expect from your product. So here's a little collection of our portfolio companies. A couple more have been added since then. I might actually come back at the end of the presentation and do a case study on some of them, but there's a mixture there of life science companies, high-tech companies, Internet of Things, data analysis, virtual reality, biotech, medtech, and that's the sort of thing that we look at. So anyway, let's get into the actual presentation, the famous Valley of Death. It sounds macabre, and it is, I suppose. It comes a lot from the Silicon Valley, so not so much the historical valleys of death where people actually die, but in the valley where this is the home of the startups, the real traditional tech startups. It's not really a valley though, it's more like a mountain range. It's a journey that you start. You've gone through the stage that my colleagues talked about here. So you've gotten started, but then you're not quite there. You don't have a product that's proven commercially yet, and you need to get investors on board that actually believe in your product and to fund that high risk stage, achieving those milestones, getting to commercialization, and even beyond that in many cases. So it's really a case of going up, reaching milestones, then going down into the next, and then lifting yourself up again to get over the next mountain and continuing on. And for some that'll take years, and for some it'll be a shorter journey, depending on where you are and what you're doing. Lack of liquidity is really what kills companies. It might have been a bad idea. There'll be any number of reasons. But at the end of the day, you run out of money. So that is really the key to survival, is to keep a very close eye on your finances. And also keep in mind that Death Valley, or this stage, it's part of a filtering process. So if you see it from a systematic point of view, we need to have this stage because there's way too many ideas out there. There's not enough investors, not enough money, there's not enough customers. So we need a way of filtering, and that's what this Death Valley phase does. So in a sort of a Darwinian way, we actually get rid of the weaker players, so only the strongest survive, and they're the ones that can go on then and serve customers at the end of the period. And unfortunately though, it's some of the strong companies, some of the good ideas will actually also disappear. And that's because those people don't have the skills to actually sell their idea. So they might have a fantastic idea, but they can't sell it to investors. They can't explain the benefit to the customers, and then they will end up failing. So that's a point of warning, and we'll come back to that later in my presentation too. But it's making sure that you have the right people and the right competencies to cover all the bases that are required in this stage. It's really hard work, and it's not for everyone. As Helene said here, I mean, you need to be a little bit crazy actually. It's not the risk in the short term is so high, the reward is almost zero in the short term, because even though you make it through this stage, the rewards come much later. So keep that in mind when you decide on doing this. When you start your company, then don't do it lightly. Make sure you're really committed and you really know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And remember that there's a difference between then entrepreneur risk, the risk that you take, compared to the investor risk. So you're risking everything. You could probably get an 8-to-5 job. A lot of the people that we're working on in our startups, they're on very low salaries. They could easily get a 6-figure salary at a multinational, but they chose this life. So they're taking a lot of risks there, and they're managing all the risks in the business, on the development side, on the sales side, everything that happens in the environment around them, corona strikes, whatever could happen. And the investor risk is a little bit different. They're a lot more objective. They look at the investment, they look at what's the potential return here, and they're looking for a big return. Remember that. They want something that can really fly, and they know the risk. It's almost binary for them, as in it would almost be a better outcome for them for the company to go bankrupt than to just plod along for 10, 20 years and nothing really happens. So they're in it for the risk, but they're expecting a high reward. And then these mountains that you're climbing up and down into the valley, and the next mountain, it's tough, it's hard work, but remember that these so-called risks, these are also your milestones. These are every time you manage to climb one of these mountains, you're achieving an important milestone on your journey to success. So it's not as perhaps negative as it sounds when you're looking at the word risk. It's actually creating value and making your business more and more viable, and every risk that you reduce increases the value of your company and the attractiveness towards investors. So how do we get around some of those risks or deal with them? Well, there's lots of tips which got earlier today in the presentation, but I would say have a very, very clear focus. I call it a laser focus. So delete everything else that's not important around you in your life and also even in the company. Develop the right things at the right time. Anything that can wait, then wait with it. You don't have the time or the money most likely to waste your time, and that could be really good opportunities I'm talking about. You might be developing something for a particular industry, then you might get approached by a company from another industry which says, hey, couldn't you guys, you've got this great VR team, couldn't you do a VR application for us? Well, and they'll be willing to pay for you, but that'll take your focus off your main goal. So you have to decide, is that worth it or not? And I would say generally not. Usually when companies get distracted at that early stage, then they lose focus and then nothing ever happens of it. And at the best case scenario, they end up being a consultancy. So I would say maintain that focus as best you can. Bootstrapping is probably a term that you've heard. It's not necessarily eating 2-minute noodles and living in your mother's basement for 5 years, although that is the case. And there are many successful companies that I'm sure you know about that have gone through that. But it's keeping a distance to taking in external capital for as long as possible, making ends meet as best you can to really build that value on the company before you start giving away equity. To fail is to plan. To fail to plan is to plan to fail. It's a saying that I tell myself and my companies a lot. It's very tempting when you have a good idea to just go out there and do it and get started. And I think we have a lot to learn from the universities there. I know myself, at university you learn to do things very methodically, the scientific method or equivalent. Then when you get out to a workplace, you find that nobody does that. Nobody really has time for that. They just go for it straight away and hope it flies. You can't really afford to do that with a startup. I think you should, if you do a proper plan, you can save so much time, so much money. You might even do a pivot before you've even started your journey. You might come to see that it wasn't a good idea, something that you had missed, but in your planning, you find that, and then you decide to do something else, saving yourself a lot of time, energy, and money. So really, I can't stress that enough. Have a plan, write it down. Doesn't mean the plans can't change, but have a plan. And there's so much free advice. There are so many people out there in your own network and your network's network that would be willing to help you. People like, not just Biner and universities and Almi, people from the industry, people who work in the industry. Look it up on LinkedIn, ring up the companies and visit them, have lunch with some of the people who've been working in this field for years and years, present your idea, get some feedback, talk to a lawyer friend and ask about setting up the company, get as much free advice as you can. And that's just not in the beginning, that goes for the whole life of the company. There are good risks and there are bad risks. There are these good risks, which are the milestones which you have to take. You have to decide on a lead candidate in your project, or you have to decide on a particular programming language, or whatever decisions you need to make. Those are very important choices, and you can't get around not making them, because otherwise you won't move forwards. And every time you make one of those choices, you're taking a risk. But that's a good risk. But there are also some bad risks out there which are unnecessary. And I would call bad risks cutting corners unnecessarily, things that give you a short-term gain but then come back and bite you later. Perhaps employing suboptimal people. You get the wrong people in a small team, and that could be devastating. The way you present yourself, make sure your web page looks good. Make sure there aren't any errors in your presentations and your figures, because it's just so unnecessary, and it creates a negative image for your company from the start before they've even looked at your idea. And somewhere along the line, a lot of the products that we look at, or the services, they're so innovative, they're so new that it's hard for investors to grasp, which means that investors will use the quality of your presentation as a sort of indication of your own quality and how good are you at getting things done. So don't take those sorts of risks. Make sure you get your stuff in order. And last thing to get in order is your personal finances, because a lot of the time all the effort goes into the company, and all of a sudden you find yourself deep in debt. you don't have housing, you don't have food on the table, and that's obviously going to affect your ability to grow your company, to attract investors, your own sanity. When you're working so hard, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, you need to make sure that that's in order. That doesn't mean a life of luxury in any way, but it means making sure that you've thought about that and that's part of your plan. So let's talk a little bit more about investors then. It's funny, we talked about this earlier, and I've talked about that a lot in my days as investing. It's a little bit like a marriage. When you invest in Volvo or Ericsson, it's just an investment. You can sell it. Whereas when you're meeting investors and you're going to invest money together and time together and spend a lot of time together, and at good times and bad times, you need to be able to trust that this partner will be able to stick through you, that you have the same vision, and that you're in agreement as to how you're going to run things, even when things go a little bit sour, which they will. There will be hard times. There's always going to be hard times. So choose your investor based on personality, making sure that you work well together. And also look at what fields they're working in. Without going out and sort of meeting everybody, think a little bit about what type of investment you want. What experience do you want them to have? What stage are you at? Is it better to get a couple of angel investors in that can really get hands-on and work with you? Or are you ready for the bigger VCs? Think about which VCs in that case. What fields do they specialize in? What geographical areas do they have their contacts? Because the money, they all give you the money. It's what they can give you aside from the money that's important too. So think about that. You need to be able to, you're kind of selling air, unfortunately. Volvo's not selling air, but you are, because you have a vision, you have a product that you want to develop or a service, and you think it's going to be great. You think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But the investors, they need to be able to buy that too. So you need to be able to sell this vision and really make them part of the vision, make them understand how big it can really be, and make it believable as well. Know the market like inside out. Klementina said that you think you have no competitors. Well, obviously you do. Everyone has competitors or alternatives. Yeah, you need to know who they are. You need to know where the trends are. How will digitization affect you? How will COVID affect it in the short term, or any other of those sorts of events? Shifts in politics, anything that's happening in the world today or in the future, how will that affect you? And what does the market look like? Is the market changing? Is it combining with another market? Is it a sector that's developing that doesn't exist today? Make sure you know that inside out. Your investor will test you on that. And you definitely don't want to be in a situation where you can't answer those questions, because that'll be a deal breaker straight away. Make sure you know all your numbers as well. So you've done your customer surveys, you've done some questionnaires, you've gone out and tested a product, you've looked at done data analytics on customer products. Make sure you're on top of all those numbers and have those stats in your head, because that's another thing that the investors want to know, that you actually have studied these things. And be able to motivate all these assumptions that you've come to, because you're going to end up giving them forecasts for sales, market share. Have a really good story about how you got to those assumptions that's also believable for the investor. And then finally, it is once you've shortlisted these types of investors that you want to meet, then you just have to go out and do the work. It's actually strangely enough become easier in some ways now because of COVID, which has sped up the whole digitization. So you can actually have meetings, especially in other geographical locations. But you need to, the more investors you meet, the more chance that you'll meet the right one or the right ones. And it's hard. It's going to be a full-time job. And we see that it's almost heartbreaking in some cases with our entrepreneurs that they have so much to do in their company on the development side, the work that they're actually supposed to be doing, but then they have to put almost a full-time role in on top of that on meeting investors. But keep that in mind so you know that, so you go in prepared. And once you start getting the investors on board, then it can snowball. So don't lose hope. Even if you get no's after no's, keep going. And once you do start getting the yeses, then think about how much money you want to take in. Usually it will cost more than you think. So take in more money if you have the opportunity. especially given the workload that you have to put in to get that money. So a few little tips, there are thousands, but let's look at a few things that you can think about. The first monies that you take in externally, they are generally the most expensive. You wouldn't be uncommon to give up a third or more of your company in the very first external round. So try to, first of all, you've got your bootstrapping, but then when you do taking the first monies, it doesn't have to be real external money. It can be family and friends. It could be some loans perhaps from Almi. It could be your own capital. Yeah, your parents, anyone that you've got around you that can support you. Maybe some of the free advisors that you had helping you out in the beginning. Maybe they could go in with a little bit of money. They wouldn't be too fussed about the valuations. They're just happy to help out. So try to stretch that first stage as long as possible and reach as many milestones as you can before you take in the first money. Along with the planning, do a roadmap with all your financing, so you at least have some sort of plan in place. Investors will want to see it too, but more for yourself. Make sure you know how much is it going to cost. Investors usually look at something called terminal value. So you look at, okay, here's the product today. If you reach all the way to the end, to success, this is what we think it'll be worth. And then they will sort of work backwards from there to get a valuation. And in that, they'll also be looking how much more money will you need along the way to get there. So have that plan for yourself. Know how much money it is you're going to need and when you think you're going to need it, and know which milestones, because it's the milestones that set the valuation targets. So make sure you're on top of that too. And look at all avenues of funding. So you've got the soft funding, maybe Vinnova. You've got Almi with the loans or also investments with the other side of Almi. You've got the university, the incubators. You've got different grants. There's perhaps you could sell a proof of concept as a paid proof of concept to a customer, and the customer sees that there's enough value there. You could do co-development as well. So look at all forms of financing, not just the equity. And don't get stuck in a comfort zone. We also heard earlier, it's some of the ideas will fail, even though they were good ideas, because the entrepreneur wasn't willing to step out of their comfort zone. It could be heading out geographically. In some cases, it's just heading out of the university. You've been in university almost all your life. You're a PhD student. You're brilliant at what you do, but you've never been outside the university. You haven't presented to investors, and you're scared. And if that's the case, fine. As long as you can identify that flaw in your entire proposal, then just get help. Get people in that can help you with that. Because if you don't go out there, you will fail. And your product might be great in another market. It might be really good in another country or even on another continent. And you need to be prepared to explore all those different avenues to make sure that you don't get stuck and leave yourself short. And you need to be flexible. So plans will absolutely change. You will have to pivot. You'll do things that don't work. You have to find a different way of doing it. So you always need to be flexible and be prepared for that when things don't go your way. And I guarantee you it will happen. And also be smart as well. So spend your money on the right things. Use the right people, and make sure you don't take, as I said before, any of these shortcuts that give you the short-term gain but the long-term pain. And listen. One of the most frustrating things for us investors is when we get a feeling that entrepreneurs don't listen. They know best. They may well know best, but there's no reason not to listen. That doesn't mean you have to follow all the advice you get. Most of the advice you probably won't follow, but you need to listen, think about it, and then have a discussion with the person giving you the advice and say why you think that wouldn't be appropriate. And maybe together you will come up with something better. But make sure you listen. Don't be afraid to always listen and think about all the advice you get, but take everything with a grain of salt. And I did some leadership training many years ago, and one of the professors told me that a good leader doesn't do anything. So in other words, they delegate, they have control over everything that's happening, but they don't actually do anything themselves. So as soon as they go in and start messing up and doing things, then they lose the big picture, and then they're not doing their job as a good leader. Well, that doesn't quite work in the entrepreneur's world, unfortunately, because as an entrepreneur, you need to do everything. You'll be cleaning the toilet and then you'll be working on some high-tech equipment the next day, and then you'll be speaking to investors, and you'll be doing some bookkeeping. You'll be doing everything. Make sure that you have all the bases covered in the beginning. So the things that you aren't good at, you need to get in help, but you will need to do a lot yourself in the beginning, and successively as things progress, as the company progresses, as it grows, as you take in more money, you will be able to delegate. And make sure that you've got that leadership, the traditional leadership role as a goal at the end. So you actually are almost removing yourself from the company slowly over time. If you don't do that, then eventually the company will stop growing because of you. You'll be the actual thing stopping the company growing because you just don't have any more time or bandwidth. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to, a few points. I assume that most of the listeners here are Swedish companies, and I want to say a few things about them, the Swedish perspective. And my colleagues can correct me later if they think I'm wrong. But first of all, Sweden is a fantastic place really to start a company because of the track record. Look at what we're actually per capita the second biggest exporter of the world of unicorn companies, and that's after Silicon Valley. So you have a really good basis for innovation here. If it's the Swedish way, if it's personality, if it's the school system, or a mix of everything, I don't know. But from that sense, you're in the right country. There is a very good support structure, in my opinion, at the early stage, at the universities and different incubators around. There's a lot of help you can get there to get off the ground. It's also, as Klementina said, really easy to start a company. You do it online, it takes you 10 minutes, and you're up and running. There's also a much lower economic risk for yourself because you can, I've got a friend now starting a company who's being paid by a government agency because she was unemployed before. So now they're paying her to start her own company. You've got all sorts of various safety nets in place. You can get help with your housing. You can get all sorts of grants to help you. So in that sense, it takes away a bit of that risk. And I think that's probably the reason why more people actually do start companies, high-risk companies here, than they would in other countries. A lot of companies even allow their employees to take time off to try out their idea. And if it doesn't work, they can come back. You own your IP. Fantastic. I mean, that's a huge luxury to have. So you develop something at university, you own it, you can take it with you. I also find that the soft funding withers out a little bit after that first initial stage, and then Sweden becomes a little bit more of a difficult environment, say compared to even our neighbors in Norway or Denmark. You can get a lot more funding and grants, I find. In this sort of what we call the death valley phase. So keep that in mind as well. And lastly, I suppose it's a limited market. So the ticket sizes are generally smaller in Sweden. The valuations are also lower. Another reason to maybe think about your geographical confinements and your comfort zones, maybe it is a reason to head out earlier if your product or service is ready for it. And thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for a case study or should we go to questions?
I think we should maybe move on to the next section with the panel.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but thank you. That was really, really interesting and really good tips for how to survive the Death Valley. And I think it's also really interesting to keep in mind all those aspects you talked about, to prepare, to do the bootstrapping, to listen to investors, and to seek resources wherever. I think those are really key aspects in sort of surviving through that next phase. So thank you very much.
Yes. Hope it helps.
Yeah, so I'd like to invite the rest of the panelists to come up, and I'll step out. So in the next session, we're just going to have the three of you talk about sort of the COVID situation and how that has impacted sort of the investment market from your different perspectives, and what entrepreneurs can do now in this environment to prepare and to be successful. So thank you.
It's a really important question.
Yeah, I think it's very actual for the day. So, well, I can start a little bit since I'm used to talking now. It's interesting. If you look at the listed market and the way it's reacted, it's as always, when these sorts of things happen, it's obvious after it's happened, but it's always a surprise when it happens. And I suppose the market doesn't like uncertainty. And when this pandemic first came, we didn't know what would happen. I mean, what was the death rate? Would this be a complete disaster with sort of 1 in 100 people dying or more? So then you sell. That's the obvious thing. You sell, you hold on to your money. So there were really no investments done in the startup world March, April, I would say. And the stock market went south pretty quickly. As soon as the market realized that, well, hang on a second, the death rate's not that bad, actually. I mean, it's horrible, but from a sort of systemic point of view, it's not going to break down society. It's 0.01% or something like that. And so we're going to get through this. It's just a matter of time. And the market is forward looking. So then everyone started buying into the market again. And I think that also changed the sentiment for the unlisted market, because when people started to believe in the future again, and they proved it by going into the stock market, then that changed the sentiment in the entire investment market. And that saw money pretty quickly, surprisingly quickly, flow back into startup companies, which was obviously a relief to see for us anyway. Is that what you found too?
Yes, I totally agree. Do you?
Yeah, I agree too. In the beginning, in March and April, we had a lot of calls from startups, and of course, everyone else who has a business was affected by Corona. And the startups, the investors, they pulled out. But in the long run, I think it was because Almi received Grigglund from the government, extra funding for the companies that had the hard times. But I think it was only 3 or 4 startups that got the loan.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was in the spring. Now it seems it's business as usual in the startup sector.
Yeah, there are probably some sectors that are suffering in certain industries, obviously, that are hospitality, for example, travel. Yeah. But and then there are other sectors that are having a best time ever, like in the life science companies, for example, they're having a lot of success. And I guess it's people are more used to investing in life science now. They see COVID sort of scares them a little bit, and then they're more inclined to invest in things that save people's lives.
Probably. I would like to add, though, that it's really different also within these industries in exactly what you do. We did a barometer. We sent out a survey to all the startups in all of Sweden, together with all the incubators that we work together with. And I think that 500 companies answered that survey, and you could really see that 75% of them were afraid that they're gonna have to shut down their companies within 6 months. That 6 months has just passed, so that was around March, April, and now we're just after that, and we can actually see that the 75% of the startups have not shut down their businesses, and that's thanks to the stock markets going up again. It's thanks to the business angels starting to invest again, and just like you both said, they maybe started to stop everything in March, but then they really, we can see some of them actually not being on the stock exchange either, even though it goes quite well. They invest in new innovation as they have seen that some of the life science companies, thanks to COVID, or some of the sort of sustainable companies are coming so strong. So these are changes in our society because of the pandemic and because of everything else. So they are really keen investing in clean tech, in green tech, in new types of food. So food tech is blooming, and there's so many changes that you can see in these companies. And one important bit might be also the digitalization, of course. Everyone is on it and working in those areas, of course.
Yeah, no, I think digitization was happening anyway, but this has accelerated, and that's very positive for the whole world. I think that's a whole new way of effectiveness in doing business. And some company, we have a VR company doing VR meetings for companies, and they're just signing up one Fortune 500 after the other during this pandemic. It's like the best thing that's happened to them.
And those companies have probably kept their valuations. They have probably raised more capital. But then we have everyone else sort of. And I think that we should acknowledge also that it's been tough for some of the companies.
Yes,
I guess you and we talked about it yesterday too. And we can see that some valuations has been maybe halved or even lower than that. And if people really needed to raise money for the companies in this situation, they're being quite diluted, unfortunately.
They have to be more creative. And,
exactly, in how to, and maybe some people could actually postpone their investment sort of round so they can wait a while instead. I guess that some people have done that, try to survive in the best way. And of course, in this field, you never know when it comes back. So now we're, of course, hit by the second wave. So we still need to think about in all our companies, okay, what do we do now? And maybe we should also talk to the audience about this. What kind of advice do we have now? How actually can you raise money in this setting? And maybe a lot of people have waited. A lot of entrepreneurs have waited to raise capital as well. And now everyone is starting to get to that point where you really need to get the money in place. So it's maybe more competition. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well,
I think it's more competition. But you have to be out there to compete and talk to a lot of investors. That's what you need to do. It's not easy.
No,
but
well, it's harder when you can't have the physical meetings as well. But one thing to remember is that the money hasn't disappeared. Like there's a lot of liquidity in the market today, more than ever, and you've got big PE funds doing record distributions, and that money flows down. And then they need to reinvest that money, and so they need to look sort of earlier stage. They're looking at B and C rounds. It's not uncommon for private equity firms to go in now, which means that some of the VCs are going down as well. So the money's there. It's just finding that fit, because they're all very careful with how they spend their money.
So the more customer validation you have done,
the better. And I would also like to say exactly. Maybe you don't even need to raise that money, because it's really important that you get the customer funding in place first, because that is still possible. A lot of companies are really afraid they can't meet their customers right now, or they can't meet their investors either. But actually, we can see a lot of transformation also in how you do your sales, and this sales pitch and meeting new customers is actually easier than ever, I would say. So try to fund your company with new projects and with that sort of new pilots that maybe you can do. On the other hand, while I'm saying this, I know that we have been having a lot of matchmaking, bigger companies with our startups, and it's quite difficult, of course, to get new projects in place. But also, even though the focus and everything is on how do we, in the bigger corporations, how can we take care of the pandemic situation right now, they also have problems around that. So they're much more open in how can we secure that we can get out of the pandemic in a good way. What is the next step that's going to come in? So don't be afraid about that. Just call them again, and people have time, maybe much more today than they have before, because they're not traveling.
It's easier to meet a lot of both investors and customers, since everyone wants to meet
on video.
So you don't need to travel to Stockholm.
Or London, or whatever.
And you save so much money. I mean, we're seeing the travel budgets are looking pretty good now in our startup company, so at least they can save some money.
Exactly. And I know that a lot of people contact you as well at Almi, and you have a lot of loans, and also there it's a huge competition. But I would still recommend them to contact you, because I think it's very good to have that loan in place, and maybe contact your owners at this stage. And if you have the loans and the owners, maybe it's easier to get the last piece from an external investor.
I think it's just the financing as a puzzle. You have your own money, hopefully some investors, and can you increase by taking a loan from Almi or the bank or BJR or whatever, or some funding from Vinnova. You have to. A lot of small pieces help you along the way.
Puzzle it together in some way,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for answering that question and talking about the COVID situation and how that's impacted sort of investment market and startups. And I wanted to thank you also for joining us here today. I think the information you shared is very relevant. So thank you so much.
Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.